It's really a pleasure for me to introduce Sarah MacDonald to celebrate the publication of her book of poetry, The Motorman's Daughter. It's an honor to publish it, and it's been an honor to work with Sarah for the last few years on her writing. She really is an extraordinary poet, and she's brought so much together in not only her life, but I should say the mythology of her life. You know, there was a time when poets wrote about the Greek myths, and we live in an age when the great myths are the myths of our life. And there are experiences we have that in our personal life become mythological. And it's the duty of the poet to somehow make them come alive, which certainly Sarah does in such a lyrically beautiful way. You know, a reading is a very special kind of an event. In the ancient Greek days in Athens, there was no publication to speak of. It wasn't like we had printing. You printed your poems on a scroll, and maybe someone else copied the scroll and gave it to someone else who was rich enough to afford another scroll. But it wasn't like you had a bestseller list. In those days in Athens, a publication amounted to reading it. So, you know, we always see the image of the Greek poet with the laurel wreath. That meant that at the reading, he won the prize, but the act of reading was the publication. The other thing that a reading tends to do is it tends to be a chance for the poet to interpret their poems. You read them, but you want to hear the poet read as a way of getting their interpretation. Actually, when I first came to Los Angeles, it was very much like Athens. There wasn't a lot of publications going on then in Southern California. The rise of computerized typesetting didn't exist. So the only way you could get to find out what a poet was writing, what a poet was working on, because as a poet you wanted to know what your peers were doing, was to go to a reading. So the reading didn't stress the performance of it. It was just the poet reading, and you got to hear what they were working on. And, so Jim's doing that. Oh, yeah. Oh, Bill is doing that. So it was a way of learning what your fellow poets were doing. It wasn't so much about their performance, but to be witness to what they were writing. But there's a third aspect to a reading that I think is the most important, and I think it's why we are here today. It's not so much that it's a publication, because the book already exists. You can buy the book, and since the holidays are coming up, it's only $15. Get a couple of extras. You know, you can use them for doorstops if you don't want to give it to someone. And it's not a performance. It's not so much that we're getting Sarah's interpretation of the poems, though we certainly are. But there's a third dimension to the reading, and that is the exchange between the poet and the audience, the bearing witness of the enlightenment of the poems themselves. Because the poet reading alone, you know, there is no connection. You listening to the poems being read maybe in your mind in a book, there's no connection. But this is a very special thing for me, a reading. It marks the connection between the audience and the poet, a bearing witness by both to the mythology of the self that is revealed there, and revealed so exquisitely and so beautifully by a poet such as Sarah MacDonald. So would you welcome Sarah to the reading?
Thanks, Jack, and thanks to all of you for coming today. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate all the help that I've had with the book. It's been, he said a few years, but it's been 8 years since I've really focused. I've written all my life, but the past 8 years I've been studying with Jack, and it's been a wonderful experience learning all this. So I've arranged it in such a way that it reflects a little bit about the book. And the first piece is kind of, well, I'll just start reading it. It's called My Half-Life. Sometimes I feel as though I'm trapped in a fairy tale called The Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen. It's about a young girl, a princess, with 11 brothers and a wicked stepmother. The stepmother is so jealous, she puts a spell on the brothers and turns them into swans. The little princess wants to save her brothers, and the only way to do this is by weaving coats out of nettles, which are very painful to work with and cause her hands to blister. She also must be silent while she is doing the weaving. She keeps silent and weaves until she is almost burned at the stake for being a witch, and at the last minute flings the coats over her brothers, and they all become men again, except for the youngest. Because she hasn't been able to finish, one of his arms remains a swan's wing. In my version of that fairy tale, most of the time I'm the princess, except instead of weaving coats, I'm condemned to write. And at the same time, I have to keep silent. Because of this conflict, each word that comes out is associated with pain. That's why I write so little and so sparingly, because each word hurts, and each word has to fight for its own existence. I don't sit here easily. I'm not charmed by my own words. I'm embarrassed. I hate to read them back. They're not mine. They've forced themselves out of me. They bark at me in my left ear and squeeze themselves out of my fingers. I don't know why it has to be this way, but it is. I must keep silence, and I must write. What will happen if I don't write? Sometimes I feel that the world, which is already spinning out of control, will just erupt in flames. Sometimes I feel that nothing will happen, that I've cast the spell on myself, and if I finally speak, I will just bore myself to death, or at least fall into a deep sleep. My other take on this tale is that I am really the youngest brother, the one who didn't get the full coat, the one whose arm is that of a swan. That's why my right arm is crooked. It's not crooked because of a birth injury. It's still under a spell and has remained a swan's wing. This makes a lot of sense to me, since I've certainly run into a lot of wicked stepmothers and stepfathers in my life who have been very free with their spells. There are good things about this too. The arm doesn't hurt, and it reminds me of who I am, part swan, part princess. The one thing I do know is that I like living this half-life, this between life, the one in which when you close your eyes and look away, everything is different, the one where real living is done in sleep, the one where animals can talk and you can be greeted by the gods of the house when you come home. Now, I hope by now you all know what a motorman is. And, you know, what's been happening in New York has really reminded me a lot. My father was a motorman. He worked for the IRT for 25 years. We lived in a small house in the Bronx with my sister, who was 8 years older than me, my mother, and a stepbrother. And then part of the time I lived in Goshen, New York. So this part I'm telling a little bit about what happened to me. First poem is Latin for the Motorman's Daughter. I have fallen in love with Latin again. Latin words, miserere nobis, Deo gratias, agnus Dei, pax vobiscum. I studied Latin in high school. It was supposed to be good for me, a classical education, appropriate for the motorman's daughter, who knew all the stops on the IRT and rode the dinky to school. The teacher talked of declining verbs. Decline, what does that mean? Present indicative. I'd like to decline you touching my breast. Subjunctive. I would rather you take your hand out of my pants. Pluperfect. It would have been pluperfect if you'd gotten the hell out of here. I memorized it all. Amo, amas, amat. All her words had different meanings to me. Who loves me? Does he love me? Does anyone love me? There was no perfect in my life, much less pluperfect. I wasn't loved. I hadn't been loved. I would not ever have been loved. I learned it all. I learned to decline verbs and roll myself into a ball when someone touched me. I learned the indicative of touch, the perfect of grope, the subjunctive of fondle, the pluperfect of stroke, all in Latin, perfect for the motorman's daughter. Thank you. And this takes place in Goshen, where my favorite uncle lived. So there's more about all this stuff in the book, good and bad. So this takes place in Goshen, which is about 60 miles outside of the city in a wonderful little village. It's called Sunny. In the country, we used to go on long walks on dirt roads going nowhere. We'd pack a picnic and just take off. My friend Sonny and I would take our 2 dogs, Buster and Pal. We used to go to a place we called the jungle. There were vines hanging from trees that we could swing on, like Tarzan and Jane. We walked and walked. I was usually barefoot and could feel the dry dust between my toes. We looked for shade when we got hot. Sonny scouted for snakes, and I told stories from my favorite fairy tales. Sonny loved to show off. One time he showed me his penis and how he could pee standing up. He said he was better than me. I didn't care. Cows and horses can pee standing up. He said he didn't know where his mother was, and I told him my father was in the city. We carped about school teachers and the school bus driver. When we ate, the food was great. Velveeta cheese on white bread wrapped in wax paper. We walked and walked, Sonny and I, nothing between us in a jungle populated by bugs, birds, and a few harmless snakes. We crossed over brooks and creeks and rickety bridges. We heard trains in the distance and open and closed farmers' gates. We never got lost. Nothing remains. I walk different paths now. There's not much grass and just a few birds and trees. I'd like to go back there and walk with Sonny and the dogs and tell him what a good guide he was, and that I'd learn to pee standing up if I have to. This poem is not in the book, but it tells a little bit about my family, my life in the Bronx. This will be in my next book. It's called The House of Secrets. My father, the big red giant, never heard anything. Secrets buzzed around him like drunken wasps. He went to work wearing his engineer's cap and carrying a lunch pail, came home, wrapped himself in a brown army blanket, sat on a gray chair in the living room, and prayed. My house was a house of secrets, thick secrets like banners hanging from the piano, dumped across the kitchen table, displayed in front of our house like a gold star mother's flag. If you listened, you could hear them. They came over our Stromberg-Carlson radio, through the static when my father tried to tune it. You could hear them in the crack of my mother's voice when she tried to sing. If you'd bother to ask my cat Tiger or my dog Jeep, they'd tell you, because they knew everything. One day, Rachel, my older sister, left the house early to go to Jersey City for a school project, she said. She came home late in the day, all doubled over. She went to bed with the flu and skipped school for days. It soured me on Jersey City. She married her boyfriend and had us over for holiday meals. She got drunk and passed out in bed every time. One drink and she became an assassin. She needed no weapons, only her words. We were silent, participating in our own murders. I left the house as soon as I could, leaving the house, the animals, and the secrets. I left and didn't look back, afraid of the banners of secrets and afraid of becoming like Rachel, my big sister, who watched out for me when she could. I knew that it was best for me to get away so far and so fast as I was able, and I never stopped leaving. But last night, in my dream, Rachel was beautiful. I told her she was welcome in my dreams at any time. We could go to Jones Beach and lie on the warm sand and look at the waves crashing on the shore. We could bring a portable radio, Ritz crackers, peanut butter, and Cokes, and listen to Frank and Bing, and argue about who was prettier, Rita Hayworth or Ava Gardner. The Silver Bracelet. I'm talking to the old Indian on Lincoln Boulevard. He sells silver and turquoise jewelry at a stand on the sidewalk. I love all of the bracelets, but there is one that I like especially because of the color of the turquoise. The blue of it reminds me of Easter eggs. I say to him, I really like this one. He asks me, why? I say, because the turquoise has the color of a blue Easter egg and I love Easter. He says, I'm glad it reminds you of something so nice. It's $8.95. I say I wish I could afford it. The Indian tells me how his people have been abused. He tells me of life on the reservation. I listen, a 14-year-old who understands abuse, a girl who wears bluegrass toilet water and dreams. I see him about twice a week after my tennis lesson in Lincoln Park. I look at the same bracelet every time and tell him how much I like it. He says it's $8.95. I say I can't afford it. But he is nice to me and tells me more stories. I'm there at Texas Tennis Shop and I take lessons in the park. I take the stairs to the beach and try to swim in the ocean, coming home with grains of sand, home to the drunken sister who rages herself to sleep. All this sun is new to me. My father has a stroke and my mother has to get rid of me, and my sister has to take me in with her 2 damaged boys and an ill-fitting husband. I scoff at the brown-green grass and the beige houses. I laugh at the drive-in and the girls on roller skates. There is too much sun for me. I leave, never to return, I think, and forget everything except for Texas Tennis Shop and the Indian and the silver bracelet he gave me when I leave. This takes place in college. For a couple of years, for my first 2 years of school, I went to a college outside of Champlain, New York, on Lake Champlain. It was really a very beautiful part of the country, about 60 miles from Montreal. This is called the Narrow Path. Buddha, Kuan Yin, Julian, silence, compassion, comfort, plagues, pestilent eruptions, all here, jostling our sentiments. We scramble and sit on the silver Swiss ball, silencing ourselves, dreaming of past times, knowing that nothing, no thing has changed. There is only one real end to the story that started at our birth. The lake was shimmering in the moonlight. There was a silver path to the moon. We watched, my friend and I, on a summer's eve. We watched as the woman dove in, splashless, slicing the water. We watched as he swam, following the silver path. We 3 were there, together in the dark. She was swimming for us and for the moon. The professor's wife, caressing the water. We watched on that still night, seeing beauty, not knowing that she would be dead by winter. I miss my friends, the ones I loved and hated. I miss Paulie, who never grew. I miss Laura Alterwitz, who wore thick glasses, and Jimmy Bernhardt, who was fat and funny. We were so close, tramping on each other's shadows. Elsa, who ate eel for lunch, and Benji, who was a tattletale. I miss them all, every one, and I never want to see them again. My creeping fig has been trimmed. It no longer touches the roof line. A temporary haircut. That plant loves the roof. I trim myself every day and walk the narrow path around the lake that waits for all of us. I swim now for all of us, the narrow path, the silver path to the moon. Now we're kind of in the middle section, and this is, I'm so glad my kids are here because I wrote this. This took place, it's a true story. It's called The Whole Truth, so it's a true story. And it took place in the late 60s, and when we lived in Orange County in a little house on Deborah Lane in Newport Beach. And it's called The Whole Truth. I fell in love with sensitivity training as soon as I heard about it. The idea was that we'd all get together in groups, listen to each other, empathize, do a lot of active listening, and would come out better humans. So I arranged for a weekend away from the kids and my husband and went down to La Jolla for a 3-day meeting, sponsored by the Carl Rogers Institute. Rogers was the father of client-centered therapy. There were 12 of us in our group, including a couple of forest rangers. As we talked and listened to each other's lives, there was one guy that I really liked. He was a Catholic priest from Detroit. He was good-looking with a high forehead that seemed intelligent rather than foreshadowing baldness, and he had short brown hair, unusual in the late 60s. He wasn't dressed in his collar, so I didn't know his profession until the second day. We had coffee together during the breaks and went out with a group for dinner on Saturday night. On Sunday, the last day, I asked him what his plans were. I'm scheduled for a retreat in San Diego, and I have some time to kill before that. I'm planning to just drive around Southern California and get to know it. Come up and stay with me and Bob and the kids for a couple of days. Would love to have you, and you can have the den. I love Larry, and I was sure that Bob would like him too. Larry arrived the following morning. He was good with the kids and even got on well with the dog and the cat. Bob would be the final test. Bob got home at 6 and everything went fine. Both Larry and Bob were liberal, against the war, and loved to talk politics. My chicken casserole came out okay, and the kids were great. We put them to bed and stayed up and chatted and drank some wine and went to bed. The next day was a big day for Larry, me, and the kids. It turned out that Larry liked to fish, and we went out fishing on a boat that left the marina early in the morning. It was a beautiful day. Larry baited the kids' hooks, the kids caught some fish, and there were plenty of donuts. We came home exhausted. Dinner that night was fresh fish. The kids were exuberant and couldn't stop talking of their day. They had really bonded with Larry. After dinner, we had some wine, talked of the day, and Bob got sick of it, and then the talk turned to politics. Larry did say a little bit more about his background. He came from a suburb of Detroit, was the oldest of 4 children, went to seminary right after high school, and had been an ordained priest for about 3 years. I was tired, and Bob had to get up early for work, so we both went to bed around 10:30. Larry stayed up to read. In the middle of the night, it seemed like the middle, someone was knocking on our bedroom door. At first, I didn't know who it was. One of the kids would have come in crying. It had to be Larry. "Come in," I said. "Sarah, I have to talk to you and Bob," said Larry. "He's still asleep. I'll just get up and come," I said. "No, I have to talk to Bob too. It's really important. Please, I hate to bother you. Please." "Okay, I'll get him up." I nudged Bob as gently as possible. We threw on our robes and stumbled out to the living room. I was curious and Bob was annoyed. Larry had left some lights on in the living room and was sitting on the Lincoln rocker, so Bob and I sat down on our blue couch facing him. "Well, Larry, what is it? What's going on? What's so important that we both had to get up? Can we help?" I said in my most compassionate voice. "I have to tell you something that I've never told anyone before. It's really important. Thanks for listening," he said. Bob gave me one of those glances that said, "Look what you've gotten us into now." Bob got up, went to the kitchen for a glass of water. "I need to talk to both of you, please," Larry said. So Bob came back and plopped down on the couch, glass in hand. "What's up?" he said. "I'm tired. This is something I've never shared with anything, and I have to tell someone now. I have to." "Okay, tell us. We're listening," I said in my most empathetic voice. I put my hand on Bob's to keep him on the couch. I knew he was ready to go back to bed. "I'm a homosexual. I never told anyone," Larry said. I didn't know what to say. I felt that I had to say something, the right word, the most compassionate, empathetic response. I knew Bob wasn't going to say anything. "So you're a homosexual. That's okay. Do you want to talk about it now? Are you sure? Is there anything we can do to help?" I was starting to babble. I'd had a lot of gay friends in New York, and so had Bob. We weren't completely unaware, even here in Orange County. "How can we help?" I repeated. "Sarah," he said, "I'm attracted to your husband." "That's nice," I said. I think he's good looking too." Bob was silent. "Listen, Sarah, I'm attracted to your husband sexually," he repeated. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and here was this man sitting across from me in my living room saying that he was attracted to my husband. I knew I was supposed to say something, and I was clueless. Bob was in a stupor. "Are you sure?" I finally said. "Sarah, when I look at your husband, I get a hard-on. I'm sure." Well, there was nothing I could say to that. I'd never even thought about Larry's penis, much less his erected one. I was way out of my league. "Well, I'm not attracted to you," said Bob. He walked out and went to bed. I sat there for a few minutes trying to think of a compassionate response at 1 in the morning, something like that. "Do you still have the erection now? How does it feel? Do you have one often?" I couldn't say anything more. I struck out. Nothing came to mind, nothing. I told Larry I'd see him in the morning. The next morning, I got up and left for work early as planned. I made a good breakfast for Larry and the kids. When the kids went out to play, Larry said he'd be taking off and was already packed. He said goodbye to the kids, got in his car, and drove off. I wished him safe travels. After he left, I sat down at my kitchen table and thought, here is the one time in my life when someone I know told me something that was true, and I didn't know how to deal with it, or even if I should be dealing with it. It was time to resign my position as the sovereign of sensitivity, the queen of compassion, and empress of empathy. So much for the truth. I knew that I would never forget Larry, his attraction to my husband, and his erect penis. It's not mythology, it was really heaven. Okay, so now we're moving on a little bit. This is called To Be Fabulous. It was my birthday, which I always a good time to be thinking about death. I love the way burials have gotten green. I think I'll probably want that. One thing I do know is I don't want my kids worrying about what to do with my ashes. I don't want to be in a coffee can lost in someone's garage. Dump me in the ocean or something like that, easy and cheap. There are so many ways to die. Is it better to pay almost $10,000 and die in a sweat lodge in Sedona, in a crash on the freeway, or drop from the sky in a plane with a bunch of strangers? Is it better to be happy and die? Is it better to be sad and die? Is it better to be angry and die? Is it better to be fat and die? Is it better to be thin and die? Is it better to be stupid and die? Is it better to be smart and die? Is it better to be awake and die? Is it better to be asleep and die? I have decided that it is better to be fabulous and die, to be outrageous, to still be alive and die. I have turned over every stone, rock, clump of dirt in my life, every talent, glimmer, and good piece of my life, every shining thing that I can think of, and then I can laugh or at least smile. I shall be the Cheshire Cat of death. When I die, I shall be alive. Cleopatra's Barge. I don't sit in the lap of fame. No one's made a movie of my life. I don't have my own house my own boat in the Florida Keys, and yet I'm still here for no good reason. I've done my time. I've messed up too many times to count, disappointed the world and myself, took the wrong turns, came up empty, dry, sere. I never found rewind. I am near the end, working in a small house with a small dog. I'm too old for love, for that gentle touch, that smile across the room that the TV says can happen at any moment. Not to me. I've left the land of fucking except with myself at night in the dark. I have no dream lover, no one for sharing my bed. I'm contained as a barge or an oil liner, filled with fuel, headed slowly down the shore. Pretty girl. I've always wanted to be pretty, not gorgeous, not beautiful, pretty, passing fair, nothing excessive. I've always wanted to fit in, be everyone's friend, reliable, compatible, steadfast. All the clocks in my house read different times. I'd like to write that it's my house, but it's not. It's the bank's. I'm still paying them for it. I live in it, me and the dog. It's a big thing to live in a house alone. I'm looking at my creeping fig writing on my table, generating my own trash, separating out the recyclables. I want to be buried deep in the ground so that I can be recycled. A fitting end for the pretty girl. Okay, put your seatbelts on for this one. It's a little change of pace. This is called The Nectar of the Gods. How dare you? How did you have the nerve, the unmitigated gall, to leave me a note on a crinkly used piece of cheap paper to tell me that you're leaving? You asshole, you squinty-eyed, jug-eared piece of shit. How dare you treat me like this after 10 years? Leaving me on a cheap piece of white blue-lined paper, you corpulent, crepuscent, balding excuse for a man, on paper? You wrote, and I quote, "It's not you, it's me, my fault. I take full responsibility for my actions." How magnanimous, how charitable, how kind. My life is shattered in a million pieces, my self-worth has been flushed down the toilet, and it's not my fault. Thanks be to God. And you take full responsibility for it, even better. How comforting, how reassuring, how life-affirming. I now take full responsibility to tell you that you're a hypocritical excuse for a human being. The fact that you can perambulate on 2 feet and have a minuscule vocabulary is all that separates you from a jackass. And knowing that you're leaving me for your baby doll secretary that you've been screwing behind my back for the past year adds injury to insult. You bobblehead, you whining, puling prick, finding happiness, or should I say preying, on someone younger than your daughter, for shame. I keep telling myself that it's not my fault. If it's true, as you say, I'm innocent and you're guilty, then I'll take this opportunity to switch places with you and become guilty so that I can repent. I'm accomplishing this feat by raining curses down on your bald pate. Many curses, the curses of the doomed. You had your secret, and so did I, my beloved. I never told you this, but while you were out shagging your piece of fluff, I was attending meetings, my meditation in the evenings. I regularly met with a group of my sister witches, a full-fledged coven, and in an emergency telephone convocation, we have arranged for a set of curses to be rained down upon you as appropriate punishment for your cowardly, dastardly ways. 1. You will be able to have sex as much as your craven penis desires, but you will have no pleasure. It has been decreed that the pleasure center in your brain has been deleted. You will, of course, always be able to ejaculate, except that each ejaculation will be purple, a color much favored by Iraqis and squid. 3. Say goodbye to your favorite standards, those old tunes well beloved by you, Cole Porter, the Gershwins, and Irving Berlin. Every piece of music that you hear will be transformed to either heavy metal or hip-hop or both combined. Say hello to Jay-Z with Linkin Park and Korn. Maybe you can sing those tunes to your beloved. I write this with sadness and sorrow. I take no joy in your continuing misfortune. As your currently corpulent body withers and becomes flabby, and your face falls down to your neck, and your last hair falls out, I'll be listening to that old black magic and toasting you, my former beloved inamorata, with the effervescent nectar of the gods appropriate for someone of your ilk. Diet Coke. This is another good one. This is called Enlightenment. At 5:02 in the morning of May 25th, 2006, at the Pensione Calcina on the Giudecca Canal in the Dorsoduro district in Venice, Italy, I became enlightened. In an instant, I knew who I was before my mother and my father. I understood the Kabbalah, even though I hated math. I saw Buddha laugh, Krishna dance, and Christ heal. I knew the name of every cat in the world. I could read and understand Ulysses. Energy really did equal mass times the speed of light squared. I even understood string theory. Freudian analysis was crystal clear. I got the collective unconscious and drew a perfect mandala. Paradise found. I heard the sound of one hand clapping. I heard the caged birds sing and the trees fall in the forest. I was transformed in union with the universe. I was all that I could be. Gargoyles smiled, pigs flew, and the fat lady sang. Death danced as the owl and pussycat sailed down the canal. My heart overflowed as the hill sang, and the sun was always rising. That was enough for me. Okay, we're getting down to the last middle part of it. This is called Disappearance. This is called Disappointment. I'm acquainted with disappointment. My lover came to me in a dream last night. We danced, kissed, rubbed noses, he left. I have to find the words myself, the words that will let me keep living, words full of self-solace that stop me from giving up. In my garden I have no one disappearing. The flowers wither and die. The blackbirds continue their migration. Joey and Gracie will get old and die. I will be alone again. I have no more tears. I've never been quite good enough, always and also ran, not quite good enough. Life in my garden is small and sure. Pests can be sprayed away or stepped on if you're not a Buddhist. My dream is to stay here, surrounded by flowers, bugs, and dogs. No more lovers. Nothing feels as empty as when a lover leaves. I learned how to talk myself into keeping going. It'll be better tomorrow. I'll be better tomorrow. He had bad grammar, couldn't pick out a tie, liked baseball, hated cats, didn't love me. I write of a lover as a man, but it could be a woman. He could be a she. I'm sure I'd love a woman, unless the lover is a mean bitch that no one else wants. A man walks on the dirt path wearing a white cane, yellow shirt, blue jeans. He walks straight up and down in a brisk rhythm. You've got to know how to love yourself if you're going to be in the land of the second best. The birches are active, responding to the wind. The birds are noisy. I can hear a mockingbird in the distance. I'm happy sitting here writing, hearing the birds, feeling the breeze. My heart beats to its mad rhythm, syncopated like a bossa nova. I hear the children play. I can just see the bright fuchsia of an optimistic geranium near my front window. A sparrow hops at the foot of my stately birches, content to be looking for bits of food. A squirrel chirps in the background, busy with his hunt. I am happy, sitting, hearing the birds, feeling the breeze, my heart bumping in its own mad rhythm. The sparrow, the squirrel, and I share this little bit of time together, each on its own hunt, content. Everyone is neatly in his place, including me, the listener, the recorder, the prayer, the insignificant one. So much is given to me. Every day is blessed. All I have to do is breathe. My heart has to remember to beat. That's all. Okay. This is called There for the Taking. Yes, that's right. There is no time, not a nanosecond, no time for luscious, dripping, oozing sex, no time for aroused nipples, hard cocks, no time for lazing in bed waiting for the next erection or the next licking or sucking in this rumpled, damp sheets soiled with sex. Yeah, that's all gone in the ether, in the wind. It's left in beds all over the world. I think Hawaii was the best bed, then I remember France and Norway, and I debate myself as I stimulate myself. I was lush, there for the taking, mostly a kind word would suffice. These times, those in-between times, those silent, secret, wild times, those sacred times, those beloved times, are all there in the turn of a corner of the blink of an eye. I looked into my lover's eyes and saw dark brown pools of thick chocolate that I could lap and lick up with my tongue. I also saw that he couldn't see them. He couldn't see his luscious chocolate eyes. They were mine alone to see. I could see him like a lover, and I saved him in my brains and eyes and vagina, so that on a partly cloudy, windy, coldish day in California, I could remember and glimpse that one beautiful eye that's mine alone. Intelligence. Where would I have got if I had been intelligent? I mean really smart, Einstein smart. I don't fit in with my life. It's becoming narrow, despite TV, the internet, and Idol. I have my appointed rounds and venture out of the West Side on Thursdays only. I see the dark-haired gas man who asks the same question, the blonde-headed office manager who knows only one side of me. I miss the Buddhists. They don't talk. I sing with one group and write with another. What could I have been if I'd been smart? I would be rich, traveling from place to place, the same places because I'd know what's best. I would look in the mirror and see a slim, well-coiffed woman. My children would be charming and handsome. My dining room table would be filled with eloquent guests. Wait, I'm not writing about intelligence. I'm writing about wealth, beauty, not brains. I'm too stupid to know what smartness brings. With my luck, I could have married Madoff. The Silver Elephant. At first I mourned Marvin for what he did. Now I mourn him for who he was. I keep the small silver elephant that he gave me on my desk. At first I mourned Marvin for what he did. Now I mourn him for who he was. We were in Italy and stumbled upon an elephant statue. I told him how much I liked elephants. At first I mourned Marvin for what he did. Now I mourn him for who he was. I'm just going to give you a little bit of explanation about this. Jack, my teacher for 8 years, has us pick poets that we study and we read them a lot, and we sort of try to inhale them or exhale them and write kind of in their way. And we have muses. Stanley Kunitz, Ellen Bell. You probably wouldn't know all these poets, but there's tons of them to read. And so this is called My Muse. Sharon Olds, you can go fuck yourself. You can take your long aristocratic head with your stringy black hair and put it up your elegant, greedy vagina. You can stick your tumescent tongue up to your cretinous cervix and lick to your heart's content. At the last moment, you can excrete venomous bile out of your dark, dank orifice. I am sick of you. Sick of your gelatinous, slimy images, oozing out of disgusting organism, everything covered with jism. Get me out of your subconscious. I want nothing of your dreams. Give me a hard-ass muse. You're no fun. I can't begin to imitate your images. Everything I come up with is second rate. You're a skinny-ass bitch of a muse leading an elegant life on the Upper West Side in the Hamptons. I want to go back to my simple life. I want to stop opening every vein. I've lived with my ghost for too long. You might be a great poet, but you're a lousy muse. You're fired. Okay, so we have about 4 more poems and then the last one. This is called Valentine's Day, 2011. I woke up in the morning hearing the crows scrabble across the roof. One of them pecked at my skylight. I got up and looked out the French doors. The sun was just coming up, backlighting my garden. The sky was blue with white clouds, and the mockingbird was on top of the telephone pole, singing his morning prayers. Last lover poem. She's on the red dining room table, looking out the window, watching for people, cars, and dogs, guarding her territory. The little dog that snores and comforts me at night, when I feel her body pressed against my leg. The little dog who keeps me alive and warm. Lines. It's snowing down south. That's what they'd say if my slip was showing in the days when we wore slips. Now they tell me to watch my line lengths. I can never be neat, have everything in its place. Stuff is always leaking out, like blood. Okay, this is the penultimate poem. Hope you all understand that. My table, it means next to last. I'm sorry. My table. I am surrounded by pieces of my life. The remote for my music, a coaster for my hot tea, the necklace I took off last night, a notebook for my dreams, that's pretty empty, the phone and this pad, my pen's in the drawer. I also have 2 dogs nearby, Gracie snoring. That's it, my life on the table. Did I mention the gray phone? And I forgot the bright-colored sticky pad. I put those things there, and I'm responsible for them. They all have meaning to me. When I die and a stranger comes, she'll sweep them away. My dreams, my notes, the odd coaster. It'll take less than 5 minutes, and I'll be gone. Okay, this is it. This is the last. And this is, I don't know if any of you know Arthur Rimbaud, but this is kind of the way in his style. And it's called Home. I left on a journey when I was young and kept losing things, like my right eye. I thought it was on my face, and I looked in a mirror that I found on the road, and it was gone. It wasn't anywhere on my body, not on my stomach, and not on my hand or my foot. It had drained away in a stream of blue, white, and black gelatinous mass. I thought that maybe if I ate something really bad, like that green frog at the edge of the infected lake, or the brown and white caterpillar that I had just stepped on, my eye would come back, and it never did. I decided to cut off my face and only look at the left side. I did this because my right side was too stupid to keep its own eye. It couldn't be trusted. My right arm was messed up too. How am I going to climb Mount Everest? I'm always losing blood too. Red blood, brown blood, thick blood, dripping blood with chunks of black. The blood comes from my every orifice, my nose, my mouth, my eyes, my vagina, draining, dripping, running, oozing down my face. It falls into a puddle at my feet. I can step into it and feel it and run my toes through it, and as I walk out of the puddle and turn around, I can see my bloody footprints. Foolish girl. I thought that growing up I would find these things and grow another eye at the center of my head maybe, and the blood would stop oozing, and my hair would turn blonde as the sun, and my teeth would gleam bright as a searchlight on a dark night, and life would be rosy-posy without thorns. And I thought that the mountain was a gentle slope with a clear path, and the only animals were friendly. There is not a gnome or a troll to be found. Instead, my feet are shredded and torn, and the nights are full of banshees and gnomes, and cries from chained children screaming for mama. Their noise gets into my head so bad that I can't hear anything else. I'm looking for the ocean because that will heal me and clean the blood and the snot. The waves make a good noise, no more screams, and I can't find them. The sea isn't in the mountains. I roll down the hill because it's faster, and as I spin, I find a lake with a huge fish. He tells me that he'll take me to the ocean. I believe him. But he stinks of a fish store, that dead fish smell, the smell of the rotting grave of fishes, the smell that you can't wash off your hands. Even Ivory soap, the 99% pure stuff, can't wash it off. I run from the fish and use my nose. I sniff and smell and inhale, and under everything, under the smell of cars, cats, and people, and shit and perfume and rage and greed, under all that I get a sniff. It's wet and clean, and every sniff is a different one, and it's familiar. It's home. It runs through my body and lets me know that I will be home, all of me. I walk and walk and walk, and then I feel with my feet the sand. The sand welcomes me. The sand gives way to me. The sand shapes my feet and embraces each step. I walk slower now. The waves are louder, and I climb to get to them. I come down the sandhill to wet sand, and my feet sink deeper and deeper. And I stop to let the sea run through my feet, and I turn and look at my footprints in the sand. They are there, and they are leaving at the same time. I go deeper in the water, and it is good. Both feet feel good, cold and alive and wet. I sit down so my bottom can get wet. I stay seated and the wave comes and I am all wet and I am clean and I smell of the sea. I smell of the sea and all good things. I smell of the sea and the shit and the snot and blood are gone. There is only the sea and me, just us, me and the sea. And it's right. No screaming children, no mirrors, no right side. Just me and the sea. And I am home.
Thank you all for coming, as Sarah said, and thank you, Sarah, for such a lovely, beautiful, heartfelt reading. And books for sale out there if you want to buy some copies for friends or an extra one for yourself. Thank you. Have a good Sunday.